one of the very pernicious elements of wokeness is that it frequently flies under the radar, especially when it has to do with children. And I want to talk a bit about education and how the equity agenda is completely reshaping education. And there are many more things that teachers hide from parents. But I think that this is one of the things that we should definitely talk about. So there was an article here from the Washington Examiner called "Is Fairfax County Public Schools Chief Equity Officer Hiding its Student Re-Education Training from Parents?"
That's a very long headline.
Yeah, so it's an opinion by Stephanie Lundquist Aurora. So it says here, Fairfax County School District updated its code of conduct this year to include a required culturally responsive learning intervention for students with first-time hate speech infractions. In Fairfax County, hate speech is defined in the broadest sense possible to include misgendering.
So they get to define what hate speech is, I imagine. And if you are a student, you get re-education.
Yes.
So how is this not exactly the same as, what they did in Asia under communism, where, you have these re-education camps where you brainwash people. And of course, you had all of this sort of thing going on in all of the worst sort of forms of government ever, where they're just like, yes, we need to deliberately indoctrinate children.
Yeah. So I want to focus a bit on this and the formulation and the issue with this, because we have been talking about this for months and
years even.
Yes, years at the Lotus Eaters for years. I'm here for basically 10 months to the day.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so for me it's months. There's also an issue of how to communicate this message to an audience that doesn't follow the news, our news, for so long, or for people who want to find ways to communicate some of the problems with the woke agenda, especially when it comes to education, to their friends or to other people from their neighborhood.
I think one of the best ways to highlight why this is so pernicious is the fact that it quite often does target children. And I think that that's the sort of point of attack that's best to convince people that, yeah, actually this stuff is really bad, because when your ideology says that children are fair game for ideological brainwashing, I don't believe in brainwashing anyone. I think people should make up their own mind. And, I might advise people about stuff, but I don't want to force them to believe something.
Yes.
I'm not in, some sort of 1984 spin-off.
Yes. So,
but in this instance, particularly when it's children and they're trying to convince them of things that are directly harmful to the children's well-being, and it's obvious to anyone with a functioning brain, then, the points score themselves, so to speak, although it's a bit of a crass way of putting it, because of course, you shouldn't necessarily be thinking about winning in politics when there are children suffering. I think that the children is number one. The political aspect of it has to follow, but it's still very important because that's how you end it in the first place, right?
Yeah. So this issue is very important for me because I was an educator. I was in academia for years. And I really think that this is an important message, and I want to get it across to as many people as possible and give them also, you could say, ways to anticipate some of the resistance that they may encounter if they try to talk to people who disagree with them or are not yet convinced about this. So the number one problem with this agenda is that it teaches students what to think as opposed to how to think. And there's a very concealed problem flying under the radar, because if someone reads the first paragraph, it is possible to miss the trap. So every school has a code of conduct. If there's no code of conduct, discipline is not being taught.
Yeah, you have to know which rules to break. Or is that just me in school? I don't know.
Yeah, but generally speaking, there needs to be a teaching of discipline. Otherwise, it's just anarchy, pure anarchy.
You're talking to the wrong man, Stelios.
Well,
Anarchy's got a
that
more
is
positive.
exactly why I'm talking to you about it. So the issue is that anytime that there are rules, there will be words describing these rules, and anytime that these rules are setting boundaries, there will be words describing these boundaries. So, for instance, it's like saying everyone should respect each other. Yeah, of course, everyone should respect each other. That goes without saying. The question is, though, the other bit: how do you interpret respect? So in this case, for instance, they're talking about hate speech infractions. The question is, how do you interpret hate speech? And that's the other major problem with wokeness, that they have a ridiculous tendency to see everything as breaking boundaries.
Mhm. Also, the entire premise of the thing, I think I disagree with, in that respect should be earned, not expected, and that if people don't respect you, chances are
Yeah.
that you might be doing something to invite that disrespect.
I see this. I agree with you, but I think that there are two kinds of respect. One is a respect that is being earned, but the other is more of a default way of behaving to people. So you could say that unless people do something really bad to you, they deserve a kind of treatment. It doesn't have to be the best treatment,
Mhm.
and that is the extra good treatment that you showed to some people is the respect that they earn. But
Well-
you could say that there is a default basis that of respect that we show to other people.
I suppose so, but I think that, say you were in a political debate with someone who's quite left wing and you disagree with them totally,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden just reaching out and slapping them in the face, as funny as it would be sort of a breach of that sort of fundamental respect, right?
Yes.
That people understand that, if you physically assault someone,
Yeah.
it's not being respectful. And it's totally unnecessary in that instance, however annoying they might be.
Yes. So that is the issue that I want to get across, is that very frequently the policies that are in favor of wokeness are formulated in a way that to a lot of people, the problem with them flies under the radar. The problem is not that wokeness says that there should be boundaries. Everyone says that there should be boundaries except anarchists.
Don't gesture towards me. I'm a libertarian. I'm just
Okay, so
a sympathizer.
I'm not gesturing towards you, but okay. I mean,
Are you violating my non-aggression principle, Stelios?
Everyone, no, because the reason I'm saying this is because
Being facetious.
a lot of people may try to communicate this message, and they will be received as you could say conspiracy theorists by others. I'm not talking about the woke mob that has already been high with its own supply. I'm talking about people who want to actually who haven't picked a side yet,
Mhm.
and they're thinking of what to do. I'm talking about how to address to that kind of audience. So it says here also, Fairfax County Public Schools has a history of compelling speech, arguably violating the First Amendment. In the last year, the 12 Democrat-endorsed school board members have made misgendering and dead naming offenses punishable with suspensions for students as young as 5. It has also implemented a bias incident reporting system, which restricts free speech and is being challenged in courts nationwide. So the issue here is that imagine you have a child as young as 5 and does what some people interpret as misgendering. I'm trying to put it,
Mhm.
in a
YouTube friendly way.
In a YouTube friendly way. Imagine they are going to have to face the culturally responsive learning intervention, because that is going to be interpreted as hate speech infraction. And that is really weird, because imagine you have children, like 5-year-old children, who talk to each other and they do something that is interpreted as hate speech. It's really, really, really pernicious.
Well, they don't even have the understanding of the world yet
Yeah.
to even know,
To
what
hate others.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
not only to hate others, but also to know how to treat each other properly yet. They're like 5 years old. They do all sorts of stuff. If you then have to take them into some room and give them some sort of weird sort of struggle session where they are
Yes.
forced to behave in a certain way,
Exactly.
chances are it would probably backfire. If my own childhood is anything to go off of, I used to get, in trouble for stuff that was either a misunderstanding, it wasn't even my fault. And because I got a bit of a reputation for being a ne'er-do-well, people used to blame me for stuff that wasn't even my fault. And all that did was make me resent my teachers, some of my peers, and the entire school system. And I still think it's basically a prison for children in its current form, in that the state insists you go there or your parents are imprisoned. So, you're coerced into attendance. It's not optional. Not saying that, education isn't important, but the circumstances of it are very questionable.
There is definitely a coercive element in education. The question, though, is the degree in which coercion is exercised and the reason why coercion is exercised. So it's not just the enforcement of some rules in order to set some boundaries. It's also having a ridiculous interpretation of when boundaries are crossed, a completely ridiculous interpretation. And the implication of treating children as basically haters for going against the woke agenda. At as young as 5 years old, they have zero understanding of the woke agenda, zero understanding of these issues. So being treated as haters as from 5 years old for this, and also being told that they need a culturally responsive learning intervention, for me qualifies as brainwash. It crosses a line in the way that some other practices don't.
To be fair, I imagine some adult wokeists do have the mental ability of a 5-year-old. So maybe they see some sort of camaraderie with them, which is why they're probably so keen to read stories to them.
Yeah. So I think that this is basically a bit dystopian.
Of course, yeah.
And speaking of dystopias, you can basically check out our website. You could check the final installment of the Symposium series I did with Connor.
The final one or just the most recent one?
No, the most recent one. Yeah. Sorry, it's on Yevgeny Zamyatin's Sui. It's arguably the novel that kickstarted the dystopian fiction genre. So by all means, check it out. With £5 a month, you can gain access to all our premium content. It's a really good deal. Right, now let's go to the next. We also talked about bias incident reporting and bias incident and a system of bias incident reporting. And a lot of that is coming from Fairfax County.
It's funny that, isn't it? That county's known for something else, which I'm not allowed to talk about on YouTube, but it's certainly nothing to do with 2020 and certain how do I put this to not
it's the
get
thing
censored?
That may not be spoken of.
Yes.
Okay.
The great de-Trumpening.
So let's talk a bit about what bias incident reporting systems are. It says, Virginia's Fairfax County Public School system is signaling that the eyes of Big Brother are upon our children. The district school board members are currently considering an Orwellian bias incident reporting system in changes to the Code of Conduct. With the new system, students, parents, and staff members would anonymously report any incident of inappropriate conduct, including and without limitation, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, bullying, and other violations of civil rights. Bias incident reporting systems are on the rise in our nation's university. It's talking about the US, doubling in the last 5 years. These systems are the administrative apparatus used to chill free speech and are facing many legal challenges, including in neighboring Loudoun County public schools. And last sentence, a bias incident is anything and everything that an administrator, usually a so-called equity officer, claims it is. And it is anonymous.
So I can obviously see here how children could abuse this. So if someone does something that winds up another child, children are basically evil and educated out of being evil. That's my general view, is that I'm being a bit silly, by the way. But they will use this new apparatus to say, this person did this, just make it up and get them in trouble on purpose because they don't like them. There's a petty disagreement or something like that. this is so prone to abuse because you can just anonymously report so and so said this, and then they'll get called in, they'll get investigated, they'll get questioned about it, they'll probably be accused of denying they did anything because they'll assume that they're guilty because they're midwits. I mean, if they're an equity officer, they'll shake their head and you can hear their brain rattling inside. So these people aren't going to assume that people are innocent until proven guilty, like many of my teachers didn't. And in fact, yeah, I'm still a bit resentful about it. That authority figures will use their authority over children to be a tyrant.
It can definitely backfire. The issue, though, is that you could say that in principle about every policy. But the extra problem with wokeness, and this is what is the most important thing to get from this, is that it is designed in such a way that almost everything that is disliked by the equity officer counts as a violation of boundaries. There is zero neutrality there.
There's no attempt to even be objective, is there?
No. And because in their minds, the equity officers, they know everything already. Anyone who would suggest otherwise is a sort of, evil colonialist figure.
It's easy to see why American Christians would say that Satanists were trying to influence their children when these equity officers are basically positioning themselves as being omnipotent. They know everything that goes on. They are basically positioning themselves as God himself. They know all of the goings on. They know who to punish and who is right and who is wrong, when, a sense of humility might be quite helpful in that you don't know everything.
And that is ultimately the problem with wokeness, that it has the appearance of being rule-based and setting boundaries like other systems. But the problem is that underneath, they are pushing so much the element of subjectivity and emotionality and harm to emotions, with the effect that everything counts as a violation of the boundaries. Anything other than enthusiastic assent to that agenda counts as a violation of boundaries and requires a culturally responsive intervention or something. I'll go a bit to the previous one here to show you something. Speaking of equity officers, because we are going to focus on that. This article here, as the next one I was reading by Stephanie Lundquist Aurora, is reading. She's a parent, and she wrote a letter to the equity officer of that county, Fairfax County, asking for more answers, and she didn't get good answers. And there was all sorts of obstructions and how should I say it? Postponements in answering. And I saw some interesting stuff that they are paid good salaries. So, for instance, it says...
It's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about the equity officer in 2022, $232,074 per year. I suppose it's per year.
Is that per equity officer?
Yeah. I don't know per equity officer, but it's Fairfax County's equity officer.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. It seems to me to be...
Okay, so they're chief equity officer.
Yeah. I mean, any dollar is too much for this, but...
Yeah, well, maybe I should change my profession. For that money, I would change my entire ideology for $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
Forget reason.
And I want to remind the audience of something I was talking about some months ago, because again, a lot of things are happening in that county and in Virginia, especially when it comes to education. And there was someone, a lead facilitator called Mutiu Fagbai, who was paid, if I remember, about $500,000 to devise the equity policy of, and it's the facilitator here. They say the facilitator is a guide. A guide does not command or control. However, a facilitator does direct, leaving it up to you to follow. This is just...
What word salad?
Yeah.
Well, surely they should be a guide then. Chief guide.
Yeah.
Which makes him sound like he's taking you through, like, a forest or a jungle or something, like I am your guide.
Yeah, but also if you lose yourself, let us brainwash you so you can find your way back. And and
Dear
this
me.
here, it's the equity imperative, because I think this was the price for this was about $500,000 to develop this document. And it says here the equity imperative: equitable access, equal outcomes, equitable access to resources and opportunities that guarantee fair, just, and affirming experiences and produce equal outcomes for every student without exception. Well, so basically, if you wonder what the equity or the diversity, inclusion, and equity agenda is all about, it is actually about equal outcomes. It is just radical egalitarianism.
Well, it's, equity is just, the sort of mode of being of communism. They want to make everyone equal, don't they? It by the ends, not, equal opportunities. So the differences between people manifest in differences in society. No, if you're successful, you'll be oppressed and brought down to the level of the knuckle dragging morons.
I think when it comes to equality, it's again the question: equality of what? Because, for instance, for me, equality of opportunity, it is a bit ideal and unrealistic, but I don't think it's such a bad goal. The problem with the equity comes with a particular interpretation of equality of opportunity that requires equal outcomes in order for us to judge that opportunities were equal. That's the problem with equity.
I would rather ditch the whole notion of equality altogether, not necessarily in terms of equality of opportunity, but just say, meritocracy as more of a positive assertion, saying, yeah, we hire based on merit, because that is basically the practical manifestation of equality of opportunity. And of course, it's difficult to assess merit, which is why, sometimes companies hire, incompetent people. But I think that framing is far better. We ditch the word equality. It's been polluted. Also, it's not that useful when you have meritocracy, which is basically a better placeholder for equality of opportunity.
No, but I want to say this because a lot of the people may think, or a lot of your neighbors, a lot of your, let's say, the people who live in your state, they may still think that this education is not about creating equal outcomes. It's not about egalitarianism.
So yeah, pick up the rock they've been living under and show them this video.
And this also reminds me of the anti-racism idea that every racial disparity is an outcome of racial discrimination. That's the Kendi's mantra. But this also is an equivalent mantra where it is said or implied or assumed that any kind of inequality reveals unequal treatment in something in the past or is to be addressed. Any kind of different, let's say, exercise of your talents is not up to you. It's because of how the environment shaped you. And I think that this is ultimately one of the key philosophical problems of this egalitarian mentality, is that they constantly try to tell people that they don't deserve their success. Some people don't, but not everyone does. I think that's too cynical.
I think the whole notion of deserve is mistaken. Basically, you get what you can make out of your life. Does anyone really deserve anything?
I think what you're saying is correct descriptively, and that people get what they will get.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it is important to think of the notion of desert here, because we frequently, whenever, for instance, we're talking about economic affairs, there is frequently the case and the argument to be made against, some people who are economic egalitarians, that the person who has exercised his or her potential in such a way that contributes to the economy and raises everyone up deserves more than the person who doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you could say that the person who hasn't done anything could use political power or something to receive goods that they don't deserve. It seems to me that it's an important notion to use in a framework.
Mm-hmm. Well, my general opinion is that you are the sole beneficiary of the fruits of your own labor, and you owe nothing to anyone else except maybe your family. in that, they're dependent on you to provide, say, then that makes sense.
Okay, so make no mistake, all this is about egalitarianism. And last thing to show this, because this is a really interesting thing here, that was from August 28. How schools flout the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling. A Virginia high school uses race proxies to lower the number of Asian Americans. So that was a story. I think I talked about it, but what happened here was that there were many Asian Americans who had incredibly good results on their tests for a national, what was it? A national test?
Yeah, SAT maybe.
Yeah, and their good results were withheld from them for a particular time for equity-based reasons. And they were given to them, but after the opportunity to use that on their CV for applying for some universities had expired.
That is so scummy.
Yeah.
I would want to, if I were a student there, I'd want to find out the names of and addresses of the people that did that to me.
Yes.
And bring about retribution.
Yeah. So basically,
this is hypothetical, by the way. I'm not one of those students, so I'm not admitting to doing anything wrong, by the way.
So basically, the winners of that competition would have the opportunity to put that on their CV and have a better CV than without putting it when they applied to enter other universities. And that was withheld from them until after the deadline. And it was withheld from them for the reason that the equity officer decided that their success would make others feel bad.
Good.
Yeah, I did a segment some time ago called the War on Merit. That was a long time ago, but that was what happened.
Well, yeah, successful people should make unsuccessful people feel bad because that is the motivation for self-improvement. You're not meant to feel good when you're a loser. That's the whole reason you're a loser, right?
But it's not just an issue of being a loser, because sometimes you may not be a loser. You may try and not succeed. It's that doesn't mean that you should allow your feelings of negativity to basically destroy others.
Yeah, I don't think that people should drag other people down. People should be allowed to succeed on their own terms and not have clingers on drag them down to wallow in the muck with them.
And the problem with egalitarianism, at least of this radical sort, is that ultimately it leads to leveling down. It's all about how people sabotage each other so that some don't feel envy.
This goes on in communist China, actually, quite often, where because they have radical equality in sort of name only, but also they're very competitive with certain roles and things like that. And because of collectivism incentivizing selfishness, ironically, see my Contemplations episode talking about collectivism for that. It's a weird dichotomy where the most self-serving people are in collectivist countries because they feel entitled to be self-serving, because they feel like they've already surrendered up something. Yeah. So if you want to promote altruism, have a state that promotes people being self-interested. Yeah. And if you want people to be selfish and sabotage one another, promote equity.
Yeah. So final message, when you're trying to talk to people around you and to convince you to see things the way you see it, always tell them, especially when it comes to education and wokeness, that it ultimately comes down to what lies behind the formulation. Any kind of system puts forward some rules, some proposed rules, and they are using words to name these boundaries. The question is how sensitive people are in interpreting something as a violation of that boundary. That's number one. And what they suggest to do in order to mitigate that. That's issue number two. It seems to me that wokeness is all about brainwashing. And when it comes to treating 5-year-olds as haters on the grounds that they violated an agenda that they haven't even understood yet, that's just evil. That's pernicious. And it should be exposed.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on house prices. And if you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.